northeast like me, you have to ignore that foot of snow because it is actually baseball season. Yes, much better weather where the New York Mets are as they gear up for their first spring training game this Saturday against the Houston Astros. We will dive into that and a lot of other things going down in Port St. Lucie on this episode of the Queen's Connection, episode number 59. I am your host, Andrew Pan, joined by the co host, Corne Hogeveen. And I know my co host is very excited for this Saturday for many reasons, which we will dive into. But, Corne, there is still some things to be talking about on the practice fields and whatnot, and just that time of the year.
Yeah, very excited to see Clay Holmes pitch Saturday. I'm very happy that he gets the opener. I think probably the most interesting guy in the pitching staff the Mets have gotten this year. So very excited. Baseball's back is always a good thing, and yeah, we have some news to discuss, I would say.
Yeah, you mentioned that pitching staff and Clay Holmes. That's obviously the biggest topic right now down in Port St. Lucie as one of the Mets free agent signs this past offseason, Frankie Montas, who got a 2-year deal or a 1-year deal with an option for next year for his case, however you want to phrase it. But anyway, he is going to be out for a while with a lat strain. The Mets initially said shut him down 6 to 8 weeks. Frankie Montas, who talked to the media on Wednesday, he said it was more of a 4 to 6 week shutdown. So let's just say it's that 6 week. We'll split the difference there and say it's shut down for 6 weeks. Obviously, it's not great news to begin this season. Um, Almost a little reminiscent of when the Mets signed Jose Quintana a couple years ago, and he got hurt early on and was out until July. Hopefully, that's not the case for Frankie Montas. Said he felt something during his first bullpen session. So, I mean, right there early on in camp, this came up. So, um, now you have to wonder what are the Mets' options? What do they want to do? You figure at least right now, you knock on wood, 4 of the 6 rotation spots are filled, and I did say 6. That is the plan to still carry a 6-man rotation despite this Frankie Montas injury. There's some internal options. You look at Paul Blackburn, Griffin Canning, and of course Tyler McGill. We know the Mets have been kind of poking around at Dylan Cease if that's a potential road that they're going to try to go down even more now with the injury to Montas, or did they look in the free agent market? They're like we mentioned Jose Quintana, he's still available. Uh, I believe Lance Lynn is still out there. Kyle Gibson, some names, some veteran names out there. Um, what do you think the direction the Mets should go in? I think it's interesting because Steve Cohen talked to the media the other day as well, and they were talking about payroll and things, and obviously the Mets had the highest payroll in baseball right now, and you know uh, he said eventually you like to not have that high of a payroll, but you're also trying to win ball games this season, so. It's a very interesting spot where the New York Mets are in when it comes to the filling some of those rotation spots.
Yeah, definitely. I think it comes down to two options, maybe. It's probably between internal option, going with Tyler McGill, going with Paul Blackburn. I think Paul Blackburn is a lock to make the rotation, in my opinion. I think he fares far better as a rotation option than a bullpen option. And I think right now, all things considered, probably Tyler McGill for me is the front runner. Obviously, have had a very good September last year, pitched very very well that time. So I think he's the front runner. And another option I think is most likely is getting a guy you mentioned, getting Jose Quintana, a guy who reportedly likes to come back to the Mets. Now maybe there's a spot open for him. It's getting uh, spring training time already, so I think Quintana would love to have a job, which maybe means that the price uh, is fair enough for the Mets to add that to the payroll. Um, Another option that crossed my mind is Spencer Turnbull, who still hasn't signed. A guy who was a swingman for the Phillies last year, had a very good season in Philadelphia, and is a guy that is able to have that multiple um, arm role. Because yeah, if you get Quintana, you have you it all works itself out, they say. But if Frankie Montas gets back, what you're gonna do with the other arms you have? So I was thinking about Spencer Turnbull as an option. I think that's a good option to look at. But I think it comes between those two, and obviously it's not a start for spring training. I think we all know that the starting pitching is probably the biggest question mark the Mets have. I think we have a good lineup, we have a good bullpen. So the part that the Mets needed to have held the most um, before the game started is already one man down.
Yeah, if you ask me, I feel pretty comfortable with just going in-house to fill the spots. I mean, we talked about the pitching depth they've assembled, and now Grant mostly uh, in the bullpen because that's where you see the most movement in the season when it comes to roster constructions and whatnot. Go out, guys getting called up, sent down, all that good stuff. But I mean, with guys like McGill, Blackburn, even Griffin Canning, we'll just keep him in the conversation for right now. I know we talked about him maybe filling the Trevor Williams role of a couple of years ago in the Mets bullpen. But I mean, we saw it with Blackburn just a couple of his starts last year. He was really good. I mean, I know he got lit up a couple times by the A's and San Diego. Um, but that's a guy who's pitched quality major league innings before, and we saw how good McGill was down the stretch last year. So, oh, my dog's got a chew toy, Mister. Crazy. Um, But you see, with those guys, I feel pretty comfortable with them right now. I think another option too that no one's really discussing is, I mean, I'm not sure who's signed elsewhere and whatnot, but there's always guys who sign with. I think of Julio Teheran last year with Baltimore. A guy signs a minor league deal, but if he doesn't make the big league roster, he can opt out and be a free agent. I think the Mets could also explore that option as well. Just wait for spring training to wrap up, and if there's someone in another organization right now, but they're not going to make the team and they opt out, then maybe you can bring him in. I think that's something that hasn't really been talked about, and I think it's definitely an option on the table.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will say that you also have to look right now if what you get is a clear upgrade over Tyler McGill. And I have enough faith in Tyler McGill to pitch some good needed innings earlier in the season. I think last year he really made an adjustment that I believe that could definitely work for him. And I agree on Paul Blackburn. I think Paul Blackburn is a quality back end of the rotation starter. Um, and I want to keep him in the rotation. So I see him as definitely as part of the rotation this year. And you also, I mean, last year you also have the trade deadline. So eventually, if you can hold your own with the arms you have right now, but you aren't that satisfied with how the starting pitching is pitching, you have the trading deadline there to maybe add a Dylan Cease if the Padres are out. You know, maybe a little bit of a bigger guy that definitely helps you get into the postseason, also in the postseason. So that's an option too. I wouldn't mind if the Mets um, the opening day roster. I think people tend to forget that the opening day roster doesn't mean that that's ends up being the roster that wins or the players that wins you the most games. And then you can also talk about guys who are developing. Maybe Blake Titwell adjust to his tough AAA time and becomes a good arm to have down the stretch. Maybe Brandon Sproat. You know, we have some arms in the minor leagues that haven't necessarily performed well in AAA, but it's a new year, so maybe they can make a step forward and be part of the Mets depth in the rotation.
Yeah, I like the point you make about the opening day roster is not exactly your roster come August. You remember Zach Short and Joey Wendell last year, everyone? Yeah, how long did they last? Not very long. So, and I think the interesting thing too about the pitching staff, and correct me if I'm wrong, I remember this, I believe this was a bit of an issue last year when the Mets were having all these rain delays and stuff like that. I believe, um, when it comes to pitching, like your staff, it has to be that for the first 15 days of the season before you can start calling guys up, sending guys down. I know the Mets had, like I said, some exceptions to the rule with rain delays and some guys were hurt as well because I remember they signed Julio Teheran to make that spot start against the Atlanta Braves last year. So that's something to consider too, is how you want to assemble the rotation at least to begin the season because it's interesting. I'm looking at the Mets schedule right now. They open up in Houston. They play Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They actually have Sunday off, and then they're in
Mm,
Miami for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they have Thursday off too. So maybe there's a possibility where to begin the season you could get away with just a five-man rotation, and but there's also how do you want to manage that because they've talked about a six-man rotation, but um, no, it's going to be fascinating to see how David Stearns, Carlos Mendoza, and the group kind of look to get the season going with the rotation. Now, obviously, this is late, late February when we're talking about this. It's possible. Not, I hope it doesn't happen, but maybe someone else is a little gets a little nicked up during spring training and whatnot. So, um, no, still some time before rosters have to be set and everything like that. But uh, now it's a little bit of a now it's a little intriguing to see how the Mets are going to come out with their starting rotation to begin the season.
definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, that's our Frankie Montas segment for right now. But I'm sure maybe we'll dive back into it eventually when we talk about some players that we're going to find intriguing during spring training, guys who we're going to be keeping an eye
Mm.
on as we get set for spring training action on Saturday against the Houston Astros. Um, I'll let you go first with this. I think I know who you're going to pick. I think you've alluded to him earlier, but maybe you're going to surprise me and there's someone else that is really going to be has really sparked your interest uh, for these next couple of weeks of spring train action. So I'll let you go first. Who are you, and who should Met fans keep an eye on this spring?
Now, yes, for the major league squad, let me say that because there are a lot of prospects who also make their appearances during spring training, which I early in spring I always find very intriguing to see some prospects at work. But I think for the major league squad right now, yes, it's the guy that I alluded to earlier, is Clay Holmes. I've said before on this podcast that I'm a big believer in Clay Holmes. We already heard some good reports about Clay Holmes pitching 3 innings in a live BP. For me, that's a great sign. Looks healthy, looks strong. It's a guy who obviously gonna have a different role and have some adjusting to do in that role. And I think a lot of people are maybe too overly concerned about that. If I look at what Clay Holmes has already done, I think people are too overly concerned about the innings. We don't know. The Mets have a far better measurement of how the arm feels. This, so there are kinds of technology to see if the arm recovers, and I think he is already, getting through that process, works with that kind of technology. And one thing that intrigued me from watching a live BP from Clay Holmes is he showed some pretty good. I think they said on the BP it's a splitter, but I hear people talk about his changeup. So let me say split change maybe. Huh? That's a pitch. But it looks really really good. A solid pitch against where he struck out Nimmo, and obviously the hitters are behind the pitchers. I get that, but it had a lot of movement. It was a very good pitch for him. So if he can add that, and we heard the reports that changeup would be a plus pitch for him too, then yes, four tremendous plus pitches out there. And then he's a tall and strong guy, so I have every faith in him being a very good starter for us and a very underrated guy in our rotation for years to come. So and starts with spring for him. So I'm very intrigued by him.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I like how you mentioned the prospects. I mean, obviously the prospects are always interesting to watch, but uh, Clay Holmes making the conversion from the bullpen to the starting rotation is definitely going to be uh, a big topic, especially now with Montas being hurt. And if Clay Holmes falters for whatever reason, then it's not going to be all sunshine and roses when it comes to how Met fans are going to feel about Mr. Clay Holmes. Someone I'm going to be keeping an eye on. I'll keep at the major league level as well. When it comes to the bench, I know it's maybe not wow, a big, sexy topic, but kind of doing like a soft roster projection or whatnot. I mean, you look at the 1 through 9 is we have an idea of what that's going to be. Obviously, your Terens is the backup. Marte is going to probably platoon with Winker at DH, and obviously Taylor and Siri are going to split time in the outfield. But that leaves at least one bench spot open, and the guy I'm going to be keeping an eye on is Jared Young, the guy who they signed after he was in the Cardinals last year in AAA. He's had some cups of coffee with the Chicago Cubs, but was tearing it up in AAA Memphis last year, and eventually went to the KBO and just continued his hot hitting over there. I mean, he had an OPS over 1,000. He had a 660 slug in the KBO. So, someone that's got some pop in the bat and uh, corner infielder can play some first. Um, I think he played some corner outfield as well, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and he's going to have there's going to be some competition for that bench spot. I think probably the biggest challengers are Brett Beatty and Nick Madrigal. I would say just because it's interesting because you look at those guys too. Obviously, they're trying Nick Madrigal out at shortstop. We've had those reports on the backfields so it could give them some insurance for Francisco Lindor. Obviously, Brett Beatty, we know his pedigree as a first round pick and has flashed at times in the big leagues. He's showing some versatility playing second base and got some reps at first base as well. Even though Pete Alonso's back, they're continuing that. But Jared Young, I think, is someone that's not really getting talked about a whole lot. That has a real chance to make the roster opening day. Now, like we talked about, just because you make the opening day roster doesn't mean you're set in stone for the whole season. But if Jared Young has a solid camp, I think it's very possible that he's going to get that final bench spot.
Uh, I like Jared Young. I think it's a very sneaky minor league deal that Stearns made. I mean, even if it's the KBO, if you have a slugging 666, you said, or something like that, then you're doing something right. And AAA has been good for a couple of years, and his major league time isn't that much, so he didn't really have a big, big stint in the majors that can really, make it worthwhile to say what he does. However, I do believe that the Mets are going with a guy who plays shortstop as that last bench guy. So I think right now it's between Madrigal, and Acuna. I think he could be that guy. So Beatty, maybe if they let him be a shortstop in spring training and see what he can do there, maybe make him a super utility guy. I know we have Lindor, so needing a shortstop isn't the biggest need out there, but still you have to have someone on your bench, in my opinion, that if Lindor gets hurt, that you have someone who's at least capable of playing there. Maybe McNeil can play there, but um, so I see a guy, the last bench spot to a guy there comfortable enough to play short, and I don't know if Jared Young is that guy. I don't think he's that guy. I'm not 100% sure if he plays short in the minor leagues. So, but I would say that if the Mets need at some point with an injury another guy to bring up, I think Jared Young is definitely in that conversation. So if there's an injury and another bench spots opens up, um, he's definitely a strong contender then.
Jared Young, the last time he played shortstop was in 2017. It was one game in the Cubs
Well,
organization. He's mostly been first base and corner outfield these
he
last
has
couple of
experience
years.
though. He has experience as a short,
So, yeah.
although it's just not that much. But no, I think you can say that probably a Madrigal and Acuna or Acuna depends on what the Mets want with Acuna. I think if Acuna is part of the major league roster, you probably see him, moving around the diamond a little bit, play some second, maybe even play a center field because he's done that last year in the minor leagues. Play some center field. I see to be also a kind of utility guy, but getting some more at bats than, for example, if Nick Madrigal would make the team. I don't think Nick Madrigal is more of a guy who will slot in at that Sunday lineup, but overall not playing much. And Acuna would play more. So that's a decision the Mets need to make. So right now, I would probably say that your boy Nick Madrigal would make the team.
If Acuna is on the big league roster, I want him playing often.
Yeah,
I'll put it that way. Like I don't think it does Acuna any good to make the team and then he's playing like the kind of a little bit of the role that he played towards the end of the season last year when Lindor came back, where he was more the defensive substitution guy. Like I don't want that for at this point in the season for Luis Angel Acuna. I want him getting at bats and whatnot, and if that means hanging out in Syracuse for a little bit, then I'd be okay with that. Uh, but if Acuna is on the big league roster, I think he's got to be getting at bats like or consistently. Anyway.
fair enough. I would say that I think there are at bats for Luis and now Acuna to be had. I think there are some guys who are versatile enough. I don't think Jeff McNeil is necessarily a lock to be an everyday second baseman. Um, he had a good second half, but it was not great in the first half. So maybe Acuna sees some time there. Maybe you have a day that Lindor can DH and Acuna can play short. Same with Mark Vientos, Acuna playing third. So, and like I said, center field. If the Mets are comfortable with him in center field, I think I see a little bit more of Luis Angel Acuna than um, we maybe now expect.
So we talked about guys at the big league levels. Obviously, with non-roster invites, it's a nice combination of guys who have had some cups of coffee in the big league, have had some success in the big leagues, and also prospects. That are getting to hang out with the big leaguers. Is there anyone non-roster invite that you're going to be keeping an eye on? Whether it's someone that could potentially get a spot in the bullpen, for example, or if it's just one of the prospects that we've uh, we've talked about in the past. Is who's a non-roster guy that you're going to be watching for in spring training?
For me, it's Anthony Gose, the former outfielder, left-handed reliever. I think you mentioned him last week. Big stuff, um, but just walks way too many guys. So I'm very curious because he does have big stuff and good stuff and gets strikeouts. I'm curious what the Mets pitching lab is able to do with Anthony Goose. Goose is more like it's meant double O, so I think it's Anthony Gose, but um, Goose is a bird. But I think he's the guy that I from the non-roster invitees, maybe a little, probably behind Genesis Cabrera as a left-handed option right now. I think he is. If the Mets need the lefty, he's the front runner there. But I think the Mets. I think Anthony Goes has good enough stuff for the Mets to maybe get the most out of him.
Yeah, I like that. I think the guy I'm gonna go prospect here when it comes to non-roster invites, and uh,
You said, yeah, all right. I thought you meant, yeah, that's also technically a non-roster invite. But I thought we did one and then a prospect later. That was my
oh, that's what
initial.
okay. Well, I can pick someone else. I'll save my prospect for later. I can do that. So let's go. Let me pull up the non-roster invites here. Um, How about let's go with I'm looking at this roster here. Man, you kind of picked all the good guys. I'm going to say that. Um, how about Luis De Los Santos, who was on the 40-man roster? He got DFA'd, I believe for Pete Alonso, if I remember correctly. Um,
I think Nick Madrigal,
or
by the
Nick
way.
Mag. Oh, yeah, okay,
Um,
whatever. Like Nick Magical for Luis De Los Santos. Seems like a good trade off. Anyway, um, but it's a guy with the Blue Jays. He's got some versatility from what I remember when the Mets first got him off waivers. That it was talked about. He played a couple innings last year for the Blue Jays at first base. He played mostly third base for Toronto in the minor leagues, though. He's got some experience at shortstop, second base as well. So it's a little bit. So it's a guy who can. We talked about Brett Beatty being a guy, maybe a super utility infielder. That's what De Los Santos is based on. The baseball reference page. We talked about shortstop depth and them trying to get Nick Madrigal some reps at shortstop. I'm not saying Luis De Los Santos is a no the next guy behind Lindor on the depth chart. I mean, we talked about Luis Angel Acuna too, but no guy who's had 13 big league games, and some decent AAA numbers. Obviously, there's something the Mets like about him to have kept him on the 40-man roster for as long as they did before they ended up DFAing him for Nick Madrigal for whatever reason. Um, but that's maybe someone when you talk about uh, guys getting a chance in the season at some point. I think he's also only 26 years old too, so not like a veteran, uh, guy who's been around the block who's now just taking minor league deals at this point in his career. Like he's that mid 20s. He's maybe still got a little bit developing to do, but someone to keep an eye on for depth. That's for sure.
yeah, definitely. I can. Yeah. It's funny how many times you have said that. I think it's because Nick Madrigal is probably a better shortstop than.
You mean the guy who hasn't had shortstop reps is a better shortstop?
No, didn't he? I had in my mind that he played some short recently, but might
I
be wrong.
I'll yeah, I'm gonna look it up just to hopefully prove you wrong because every time I
Mhm.
get a chance to do
That
that,
doesn't have.
I gotta
Yeah,
take it
yeah,
and run with it. Uh,
exactly. That doesn't happen too often, so it's very true.
yeah, no,
Well,
not in the big league level anyway. I don't see
no.
shortstop. Minor leagues. Uh, one game in rookie ball, he played
Oh, really?
6 innings. He had an error. That was back in 2018.
Oh, wow.
So that's the last time Nick Madrigal has played shortstop in the professional
Then,
ranks.
then, then I completely changed my opinion that I don't think that Nick Madrigal will make the team. Then
There we go. Now you've come on my
I had
side of the street.
I had in my head that he's that he is at least some experience at short every year, but I was wrong. So then then I rather have Brett Beatty out there
Yeah,
or Jericho.
or Jared Young. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've gotten so we got those guys out of the way. How about prospects? Who are some prospects? Now we can get to that you're going to be keeping an eye on in spring training.
I'm not going with the obvious, obviously. Not Brandon Sproat. I think that's pretty clear. I don't necessarily have on top of my head who are the prospects that are invited. Maybe you have a list in front of you, so
I do.
I bring up a name and ask if he is invited. Is Jack Wenniger invited?
No.
All right. Um, then then it's gonna be a little bit obvious as well. But then I'm going with the strikeout guy, Jonathan. He's invited, right?
I don't see him on the Mets non-roster invites.
Oh God.
At least on the Mets,
Hmm.
at least on Mets.com anyway. So maybe they're
No.
lying to us. but those guys are gonna those
Yeah, they're
guys
gonna
always
make
get
a
called over
mistake.
from minor league camp though. Like we see it this time of the year, guys from minor league camp get called over, and
Yeah. But I'm thinking, who, well, then I think it's a big year for Dominic Hamill. So I'm curious how he starts his year this year. Obviously, not good in AAA. Same as Tidwell, but I think the time clock is running out for Hamill even more than maybe Blake Tidwell. Blake Tidwell, by the way, Rule 5 eligible next year. So for him, it's also a big year to prove that he could be part of the Mets rotation in the near future. So, but Dominic Hamill was already Rule 5 eligible, didn't get picked up, maybe a little bit surprisingly. The Nationals went with Fassel over Hamill. I still think Hamill has a little bit more potential, maybe a guy who can be more of a bullpen guy. Um, he is invited, right?
he is. He is. I see Dom right here on the non-roster invite
Uh,
list.
well, important year for him. I still think that Dominic Hamill has good stuff. So um, I think he, yeah, but I said big year. So I think in spring training, I don't really care about spring training numbers, but for a guy like Dominic Hamill who wants to make his mark, I think it's more important to have a good spring for him. So Dom Hamill.
All right, there we go. I like that one. Now I can get to my prospect. I'll be watching in spring train, and um, bear with me on this one. I think there is a bit of a trickle down effect for how the Mets might run their off season next year. I'm going to go with Ryan Clifford. You know, I've been high on Clifford for a while. Um, you look at what he did last year. The strikeout numbers are high, but he is a power hitter. He is projected to be a power hitter. Once he got called up to Binghamton, he had 18 home runs and 98 games there. He had an 815 OPS with the Rumble Ponies. 21 years old. Obviously, he came over the Verlander deal, so the Mets, think highly of him. And if he goes to Syracuse, I would assume he's going to at least start the season in Syracuse. I mean, you don't know how these teams kind of shake out, but um,
I heard double A.
you heard Double A. Okay,
Yeah, I
well,
heard that that's most likely.
okay. Well, you have to figure at some point in the season, though, he's going to probably get a call up to AAA Syracuse. But I guess the point I'm getting at here is if Clifford has a really good minor league season, I think no, and with Alonso's contract, the way it's structured, we know he's going to opt out. Um, and this is something that we talked about in the offseason too. If they really, really like Ryan Clifford, I think they would create a path for him. Now, obviously, Clifford has to help himself out and help create
Yes.
that path, but no, I just don't rule out the possibility that the Mets view Ryan Clifford as their first baseman of the future. So um, he's someone I'm going to be keeping an eye on during spring train. And what's great about it is he's a non-roster invite, so he's probably gonna start some games, some spring training games for the Mets, or at least this point in the season, if it's a guy like Alonso or Vientos playing first base. Right now, they're probably going to play a couple innings, and then they're going to head to the links afterwards. So then Clifford's going to play a lot of uh, later innings in some of these first couple of games. So I think the Mets fans anyway should probably be able to get a good look at Ryan Clifford in spring training.
And yeah, I think it's good to be aware that the young guys eventually need to get their opportunities. If we like it or not as fans, if we think um, so. Steve has said yesterday that he likes the payroll to be a little bit, or 2 days ago, whatever it was, the payroll to be a little bit less. And I think we have to at some point get to that point that we we need the young guys we have, and I don't think we have superstar young guys, but we don't need to have superstar young guys. I mean, we have a couple of superstars right now in the middle of our lineup in Viento, Soto, Lindor. So you have your superstars. I think the Mets need to eventually give the young guys a chance, and I think next year's roster we will see a little bit more of that. I think Ronnie Mauricio is an obvious guy that I think who, by the way, would be my front runner for the bench role if he was healthy. I don't think he will start the opening day season, but that's a guy who can play all over the field. So that would be a good one now. But the point is, those young guys, Jet Williams, Drew Gilbert, Naaman, Ryan Clifford, Louis Hanelkuya, Brad Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio, we have a bunch load of young guys, and at some point they need to get their shot. And I agree with. I think that's kind of what you wanted to say with the Peter Lancer situation. That's where we're heading, and I think it's fair to believe that that will start more next year.
Yeah, and you talked about like Cohen and the payroll and stuff. And David Stearns has alluded to this too. That he wants to create paths for the young players. I mean, they talked to him about Jose Iglesias, and that's basically what Stearns said. Because the young guys they have some flexibility when it comes to options and stuff like that. Which you look at this Mets roster, particularly from the position player standpoint. There's not a whole lot of guys that have options or guys you want to option, So, um, yeah, I think that's why Stearns kind of said Jose Iglesias isn't back right now. And yeah, and you gotta eventually give these guys a chance. If you're not gonna, then you probably just have to bait them for like a trade or something like that. But I don't think they're not at that point right now. They want to hold on to these guys and see if they can have an impact at the major league level, either this year or maybe next year and whatnot. But yeah, eventually the tide has to turn a little bit where you get some of these younger guys up at the big league level. And one note we should make, I can't believe it took me this long. The Mets brought back Drew Smith. They gave him
Yeah,
the John Curtis deal. If you remember John Curtis, they brought him in when he was out for the year, rehabbing from Tommy John surgery, uh, and so we should expect Drew Smith to be back in the fold next season, more likely. Maybe there's a chance you get it maybe September because I believe he had the surgery July, August, somewhere in that ballpark. If memory serves me right. But either way, Drew Smith definitely seems like he's going to be a part of the 2026 Mets anyway. So we should make note of that. And no, also we talked about Frankie Montas off at the top and filling the rotation spot and whatnot. Uh, looking at the roster, it's like how much of a bummer is it that Christian Scott's still hurt, recovered from the Tommy John surgery?
and
Like
yes,
if you had Christian Scott available, then we're not even probably talking about. Well, I mean, people would talk about external options and whatnot, but um, maybe it makes the in-house options a little bit more appealing to some fans. I'll say that, not me, as we know, but no, some people are not happy with the internal options right now and want external guys to come in. But man, if Christian Scott was healthy, that would probably change the dynamic of how the Mets would fill that rotation.
and if some arms had a better AAA year, yes, last year would also help. But Christian Scott is a guy that will probably be a big part of our 2026 roster. And let's hope that a couple of guys in AAA can add to that so you don't need to do those, 1 year opt out deals next year again. You can fill your rotation from within, and that will save money. And then you will fill um, some internal holes in the lineup also from within, and then you are in a very good spot.
Yeah, no question about that. So as we wrap things up here, is there anything anything you want to get off your chest before we wrap up this show and get ready for Saturday's action?
No, not really. I think we should be excited. It's gonna be a good team. I truly believe that, and just excited for this team to be. The vibes are good. That's what we see. I think people were maybe stupidly worried about Jose Siri and Juan Soto having a beef in the Mets clubhouse because they had a home run kind of beef last year, a home run celebration kind of beef. Well, that's clearly cleared up. I think Soto shows that he's a good vibe, good clubhouse guy. And that's partly the reason. Obviously, he's a great player, but I think the Mets also look at building a good culture in their clubhouse, and he's helping that. So it's going to be a fun team to watch and a fun team to root for. And this all starts Saturday, which I'm very excited for.
Jose Siri and Jesse Winker on the same team. Man, if the benches don't clear more than 3 times this year, I'm gonna be very disappointed. I'll just say that.
We will see.
We shall see, man. We
I,
gotta get they gotta get back to that, 86 bad boy kind of vibe, and Jesse Winker, Jose Siri, maybe they'll help
you will
spark that.
so you will go over 3 benches clearing, and is benches clearing standing on the line and yelling at each other, or do they really have to push each other at
No,
least?
no, you gotta have big pileups. You gotta have a big
Oh,
pileup, you know.
well, then I go with under, and you go over. I will go with under.
I'm just hoping for a little. I'm hoping like it's like the U.S. Canada hockey game last Saturday night, the 3 fights in 9 seconds kind of deal. That's what I'm hoping for. Also, by the way, go USA playing Canada tonight for the Four Nations Championship. So go USA. Put that out there as we wrap
Yeah.
up this. I know you don't care. As we wrap up this episode of the Queen's Connection, episode number 59. Corne, we thank you for joining us as always, and enjoyed the action this weekend.
You too, buddy.
All right. Make sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen, Spotify or YouTube, and follow us on social media, Facebook, and Elon's website. We are on Twitter, X, however you want to call it. So thanks a lot for tuning in, and enjoy the first spring train action of the 2025 season.